We got Frank on now, who's in Florida. No
Frank,
travel troubles.
No travel troubles, but just think of all the children that will be born 9 months from now in Edmonton after Saturday night's game.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
I don't think hockey popularity in Edmonton is something we will ever have to worry about, Frank, but we were showing a little bit of a snippet of the video of the new practice facility that the Panthers built. And we were just talking about how this last couple of years of hockey in South Florida, with how good the Panthers have been, is going to inspire 15, 20 years from now, these generations of hockey players, because young kids are falling in love with the Panthers, who will then one day have kids and, pass it along. So I think this little run for the Florida Panthers is going to have such a massive effect on the growth of hockey in South Florida down the line. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I think you heard the tail end of what I was talking about with our dads and the Flyers and this and that.
Yeah, I would say I'm not pessimistic on that view. I just want to be a realist about it, because everyone says that, right? And yeah, there are things that you can point to that say, yes, the next generation is coming because of that. But it also, just being here, boots on the ground now for the third game in Florida, it doesn't register on the Richter scale here. Like, if you go to a restaurant and the server asks you, oh, are you here on vacation? You say, no, I'm here for work. And then they say, what do you do? You're like, I'm here for the hockey. They're like, what's the hockey?
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. Like, that's, you don't get that in Edmonton. It's still, even though it's here, even though it's the Stanley Cup Final, even though the Panthers have a 3-1 lead, the TV numbers alone will tell you, like, we're talking about 1% of the population in the U.S. watching the game. Mm-hmm. It's still a really small number, and it still has so much growth that needs to take place.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I have these friends who live there that have gotten so into it over the last couple of years. They're back playing men's league. Their 5-year-old boy is now playing hockey, and so it's a small sample size. I'm talking about one family, but it's cool to see. And Frank, we already have a funny comment in the chat from Buckaroo, who says, "I have one child as a direct result of the Edmonton Eskimos winning the Grey Cup." So sounds like you're probably on to something.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, there were thousands of children created on Saturday night. Thousands.
Oh God, that's
Edmonton hospitals are going to be overwhelmed at some point 9 months from now.
We'll definitely be able to look to a population boom in Edmonton to winning that game 8-1 the other night. But Frank, we do want to go around the league with you a little bit today. We focus a lot on the Cup, and we're going to talk a little bit about it later in the show. But yesterday something happened that you predicted 2 weeks ago when Don Waddell took over. I know we talked about it on DFO Live, and we were in complete agreement about it. What can you shed light into the process of the of Waddell, or Don Waddell, however you say it, in letting Pascal Vincent go? And do you have any idea, because it is a little late in the game, although there is clearly some good candidates available, of what way they may be looking there in Columbus for Johnny Gaudreau's fourth coach in 2 years since he joined the Columbus Blue Jackets,
and 10th in 10 years, they said, right?
It hasn't been pretty. So what I would say to shed light on the process is Don Waddell spent a couple days getting to know Pascal Vincent and had never met him before, had only seen him coach on the bench, and just had a vague idea of what he was all about. And I don't think that there were any issues at all in terms of their compatibility or ability to get along, or even probably his vision of how to coach. I think that there was just so much leftover baggage from this season, specifically with the young players that are so critically important for that team moving forward. Ken Johnson, healthy scratched. Fantilli playing on the fourth line, out of position. David Jiricek scratched multiple times. There was no way to put all that back together again. And part of it was the situation that Pascal Vincent was handed, stepping into training camp a few days before it starts, some turmoil with the Mike Babcock exit, plus I think a real push from management to have this team try and be a playoff team that I think when you look at all those things smashed together, basically what you have is a team that needed a fresh start. And that's what they get with their next head coach. And in terms of candidates, I don't have a complete list, but I'd be real surprised if Todd Nelson, who's coaching in the Calder Cup final with the Hershey Bears, is not on their list. But I think he's got 3, 4, 5 guys that he wants to talk to, and there's still some guys that are left over from this hiring cycle. Like, I'm surprised that Dean Evison hasn't gotten an opportunity in this hiring cycle. You've still got Jay Woodcroft. You've still got plenty of other guys that have been in the mix for other positions that didn't get them, that I think are really qualified candidates. And before someone says in the chat,
we're monitoring.
Hey, why do people keep going to the same, the retreads is the quote that you always see. Why do they always hire the same people? I can't help but look at this conference final and say Paul Maurice, Peter Laviolette, Pete DeBoer, the retreads are also just damn good coaches.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they have success. It's because they're really good at what they do. And it's not an accident that Peter Laviolette's teams have gone to 3 Stanley Cup finals. It's not an accident that Pete DeBoer is one of the most successful coaches of his generation, although doesn't, is still, looking for more. And then look at the Stanley Cup final. I mean, Paul Maurice has been around forever. He's been a head coach in this league since 1995 with the Hartford Whalers. He's the longest tenured coach without a Stanley Cup win, and that is 1 game away from changing tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, look, and the other thing on top of the whole Columbus situation and who they'd bring in if they do go for one of these veteran guys who have been around. Look, you got to think Columbus, that job is desirable with the prospect talent that they have. Don Waddell has always, to me, seemed like a patient general manager. He doesn't seem to make hasty decisions. Maybe that'll be different if he has a different set of rules with his owner. It sounds like Columbus's owner is a great owner to work for, from what I've heard. And maybe you could tell me if I'm wrong on that, Frank, but this would seem to me like a really, really desirable job.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think, especially for a general manager, look at the window and run that Jarmo Kekalainen just got.
Yeah.
11 years with 1 playoff round win.
It's kind of crazy when you think about
that's the only playoff win in their franchise history too, right?
Yeah, 1 round.
Yeah.
They beat the Lightning. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
But think about this. 11 years, finally gets fired, and is still, I was talking about this at dinner last night, still somehow scouting for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was at the Combine a couple weeks ago in Buffalo on the floor wearing Blue Jackets gear, scouting for them.
No.
Yes.
And is that a Don Waddell hire, or is that a
No, that's
owner?
just hey, this guy's under contract. We're going to use him. Yeah, we like him. He just made some mistakes as manager, and he's still scouting for the Blue Jackets.
Wow. I mean, I feel like I heard a story that he might have a role, but I didn't realize that it was like officially happening. That's got to be the highest paid scout in the NHL.
Yeah, well, Vic mentioned that the Blue Jackets also beat the Leafs in the bubble, but that was in the qualification round, so that doesn't count.
Okay.
Doesn't count.
Fair enough.
But Frank, sticking with the Blue Jackets, there's a lot of rumblings obviously now about Laine. Colby and I talked about Laine last week. We kind of went back and forth on where his best fit would be, but just this whole fresh start thing, right? Is it a real fresh start with Patrick Laine to this point of his career, or is there just now concerns about him, wherever spot he lands in?
I mean, I said he has a lot of baggage, Frank, and I said it's a
well, that's fact. That's not opinion. Risk. That's fact.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a high risk move, especially at that number.
Well, it's not going to be at that number because they're going to have to retain in order to make it happen, I think. Mm-hmm. Either that or they're going to have to take back a really bad contract from someone else. So it's just another form of retained.
Right.
I think it truly is a fresh start on a number of levels. One, I think he needs to get out of Columbus. Two, I think as someone who has stepped up and addressed his mental health issues, it's a fresh start to turn the page. And
Mhm.
three, it's also physically a fresh start. He only played 18 games last year. It was a tough year. He's another guy that was scratched by Pascal Vincent, that just had an off-season shoulder surgery, if I could say that correctly. And he's, so physically, mentally, also scenery. Like I think wherever he goes, I'm not predicting that he's going to have, drop right in and have success, but it is really a fresh start.
Is there a certain team that you think he'd be a good fit? I mean, we talked about what, Carolina, possibly New Jersey, the Islanders even. Do you see one spot where you think it would work out well for him?
I mean, how many teams need an upgrade in the goal scoring department?
A lot.
Like if I'm the Buffalo Sabres, I'm taking on some damaged Patrick Laine goods at a discounted price to try and find more goals in my lineup.
Right.
I'm not leaving any stone unturned if I'm Kevin Adams.
Yeah.
But I could also see him fitting in on a team where there's less pressure to win, less pressure to perform. And I'll give you a recent example. Jonathan Drouin, Montreal, also admittedly dealing with some mental health issues, goes to Colorado, gets a fresh start, is not asked to be the guy, is no longer playing under a huge money deal that he feels like he has to perform. He's not at home anymore. And he goes to Colorado. Yeah, it helps that he had a little bit of a different situation having chemistry with Nathan McKinnon, but still goes there and is able to sort of fit in seamlessly because the pressure isn't ratcheted up and it's not all on you. It's the focus and attention isn't all on you. So I could see it from both perspectives, either the team that needs to get back in the mix like Buffalo or the team that's already there and is just looking for supplemental help. I think he'd be a really good fit in those types of situations, but Colorado's already, as an example, they're already dealing with their own cap issues.
Yeah. I mean, Taylor Hall kind of thrived in a situation where he didn't have to be the guy when he went to Boston. Obviously a different situation. But I hear some of those teams that, and like, I think about like Patrick Waugh and like leaning on Laine. And I don't know how those types of things, would play out. Frank, look, I wanted to talk a little bit about your buyout article that you wrote in the last week on dailyfaceoff.com when you put up some of the biggest, the names of the biggest candidates who could be, buyout players. And, Pierre-Luc Dubois, you had at the top of the list. And we looked at it on Cap Friendly and you wrote about it. Not actually that devastating to your salary cap to buy that contract out. Actually kind of shockingly reasonable. But, Rob Blake said we have no plans to do that. And I know these guys can change their minds. I remember when Shattenkirk got bought out in New York, they said they had no plans to buy him out. And he literally got bought out the next day. I lived it with him and remember being with him when this happened. So on that list, who do you think is the big name that's going to get bought out? I mean, I know you had JG Pajot on there, Torrey Krug, Campbell,
Barclay Goodrow.
I remember when JG Pajot was kind of the belle of the ball when he first got traded to the Islanders, and they were like, "This guy's going to put us over the edge," and blah blah blah. But who is going to be the guy that you think actually a team pulls the trigger on?
I think the Oilers have to do it with Jack Campbell. They can't go through another year of Campbell counting against almost $4 million on their cap to play in Bakersfield. Just doesn't work. Not with all the other, considerations that they have. So his buyout would drop to 1.1 million next season, and that would save them 2.85. So it would almost basically wash away the mistake that they made with Connor Brown, because his contract this year is a bonus overage that carries over to next year. So he's 3.25 million on next year's cap, even though he's likely not playing for them. And so essentially the Oilers would just be kicking the can down the road, right? Because then the Campbell contract stays on the books beyond that. But at least in temporary terms, you get some relief. And for a team that's in the Stanley Cup Final that you could easily see a path for the Oilers to get back there next year. It all kind of makes sense. So I think he's an almost certainty. I think he's a 95%er in terms of, confidence that he'll be bought out. But I still, to go back to Dubois, like I know what Rob Blake said, and you just referenced it. Like, first off, the fact that the question was asked and no one was like, oh my God, what a stupid question. Like, that the team's been thinking about it. The question is, will they be able to pull it off? Because he turns 26 on June 25th or 4th. And once he turns 26, then the buyout is double
Way
the
bigger.
cost. Yeah.
Right.
It goes from
1/3 to 2/3, right?
Right. And so the buyout window doesn't open until 48 hours after the conclusion of the Cup final. So if it goes to Game 7, they won't actually be able to pull that off. But this is their one and only chance. Like I said, he turns 26 in a week's time. So you either pull the trigger and you get out from under a really bad deal that's going to be on your books for the next 7 years at $8.5 million, and you live with a relatively minor buyout for the next 14 seasons, which is not comfortable, but at least you would have saved yourself $31 million in real cash. Like, that's $31 million you get back for your owner. And you admit that you made a mistake. You traded assets in addition to the contract that really makes it painful, but you live to see another day. And I think I cannot stress enough how much sense it makes for the LA Kings to get out from under this if they have the opportunity to do so, because the only thing worse than making a major mistake is to double down on it.
Yeah. And every year that goes by, Frank, and every time the salary cap goes up, that buyout hurts you a little bit less because the percentage gets a little bit lower. Johnny, why don't you,
when it's $3 million a couple years from now, the cap's going to be $100 million, and you're talking about a 3% hit when it's down to $1 million again, and you're in years 12, 13, and 14 of this buyout. Like, we're going to be talking about 0.25% that buyout hits, and it just, again, cannot stress enough how much it makes sense. And by the way, cannot stress enough how much we need a place like Cap Friendly. The fact that they're going away around July 5th makes
horrible.
Me sad. Yeah.
Well, and just to address Catherine in the chat, Rob Blake's exact quote, because I looked it up today, was, "We don't have any plans to do that." So he didn't say we'll never do that. We're not doing that. He said right now that's our plan is not to do that. Well, that gives you a little bit of a wiggle room to
100%.
Say, well, our plan changed.
No, so let's take us back to April. They don't know if the Stanley Cup Final is going to go 7 games. What if they don't get the chance? So if you say, yeah, we're going to do it, all you have is hysteria for 3 months being like, oh my God, they're buying out Dubois. And instead you were able to put it to bed. And if it comes up again and you pull the trigger, then it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Frank, I just wanted to ask about one specific player that we had a question about in the chat from Adam Kerr. I actually haven't seen or heard much on Patrick Kane, but are you hearing anything on him in Detroit? Because it seemed like his messaging at the end of the season was that he won't be returning to Detroit and testing for agency. Have you heard?
Yeah, I think they've still been in contact, but I think the expectation is that he's moving on. Not 100% certainty, but look, I think Patrick Kane's only going to be better next season. He finished on a pretty strong note and had some magical moments for the Red Wings as they fell just short of that playoff spot. But you get finally a normal summer of training. Like, I can't stress enough how important that is for someone that's his age, that's been through a lot. He's as hungry as any player I've ever seen. I think his passion and his drive to be the best is as detailed and dialed in as anyone. And I think if you can find a place that he really likes and give him some term, I'm talking 3-year deal, something like that, the AAV is not going to kill you. And I think what he can provide for you is near point per game performance that he was really close to that already. I'll tell you what, I don't know if they're actually going to make it happen or if they want to, but I can tell you that they had interest in the New York Rangers, and he had interest himself when he went through the free agent process, because he felt like when he got to New York and was hurt, that he tried to do his best, but that he sort of disappointed them. They didn't say that, but he felt like he left something on the table because he wasn't at full strength. And I think wanted a chance to maybe try and do that over again to make it right.
So you think there's a redemption opportunity here?
No, and knowing him, that's exactly his personality. He will want to go back to New York and show people that he can. And look, if you could get him at, let's say, $5 million for 3 years, and you can get 75 points out of him, I can't show me a team that couldn't use that. I'd be hard pressed to find it.
With all due respect to Tyler Toffoli, I don't think they're in the same category.
Not even at this point.
But do you think now? Well, and I guess we can save this conversation actually for after we let Frank go, Colby. But
yeah,
you have one more.
Let's just ask Frank. Let's put him on the hot seat really quick before we say goodbye to him, because we know you have a busy day today, Frank. You're in Sunrise, or you're in Fort Lauderdale. You'll be in Sunrise this evening. I'll wave to you upon landing in Florida this evening. But what's your prediction on tonight's game? I mean, is the Oilers going to drag Alberta, or are we going to see the big shiny cup handed out in Sunrise for the first time ever tonight?
Man, I got to tell you that I have basically zero feel on this.
Yeah.
If you're a gambler,
everyone else.
If you're a gambler and that's what you're looking for is intel, I don't think there's any. I've seen the lines from Betway. I don't think there's any value in playing the Oilers. I have a hunch that the Oilers are going to try and find a way to send this back to Edmonton for Game 6. But I could just as easily see Bobrovsky coming back and shutting the door after a really tough performance. Like, I mentioned driven and detailed athletes. Like, Bobrovsky's in the same category in terms of Kane and their drive. And I'll tell you what, though, if Edmonton finds a way to get back there for Game 6, I think we're in Sunrise again for Game 7.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then also,
that'd be the dream. That's what we all want,
If not all of us, because it's draft week, and you'd be flying right from there to Vegas, which is fine if need be. But if you're the Florida Panthers, you got to empty the clip tonight.
Yeah, it has to be a Game 7 mentality, right?
This is your shot to make it easy and not sweat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, Frank. Well, listen.
Yeah, thank you.
Go get a little vitamin D if you can today. Get yourself a little fresh air. We know you've been buried in the computer doing shows, writing articles. We appreciate it.
You can though.
Catch Frank today at. Go ahead.
We all know that Colby's all about the D, so it's good.
Is that what you're gonna start doing now when you leave the show?
He always comes fine. You can catch Frank today on the Daily Faceoff live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel at noon with Tyler Yaremchuk, along with anywhere you get your downloads, your podcasts on this exact YouTube channel. So make sure you're back around noon. Frank, appreciate you coming on today. Enjoy your day in Florida, and we'll see what happens tonight.
See you guys.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.